Why did they call her in the middle of the night? What secret could be so urgent, so terrifying, that the generals whispered instead of shouted? Dr. Lisa Martinez stared at the phone in her hand, and she knew that whatever waited for her in the frozen South was something that would not let her sleep again. The wind tore across Antarctica like a living beast, its teeth of ice cutting through every layer of clothing. Men and women huddled around machines that screamed into the night, drilling cutting. Lifting, melting what had been hidden for longer than memory, Lisa stepped from the transport, her boots crunching against snow, older than human history, and she saw the hole, and she saw the shadow, and she knew at once that this was not human. This was not Earth. A man approached, tall, scarred, the kind of man who carried command like other men carried burdens. Captain Jake Sullivan extended his hand, his voice steady but his eyes alive with fire. "Welcome to the most important discovery in human history," he said. And Lisa believed him because she saw what lay beneath the ice, a shape vast and dark, stretching farther than the lights could reach. They descended together into the abyss, a cage of steel carrying them down into silence, the walls of ice glistening like glass, until finally the ship revealed itself, not a ruin, not a fossil, but a presence. Its skin of metal absorbing light as though it were drinking the very energy from their lamps, symbols etched across every surface, symbols that glowed faintly when touched, symbols that spoke of a language that no one on Earth had ever written, yet somehow felt ancient. Amy Peterson was waiting, her hands shaking, not from the cold, but from awe. She pointed at the walls, her voice trembling. "Lisa, these patterns are older than our civilizations, older than the pyramids, older than language itself. They are not ours, they never were." Lisa reached out, her fingers grazing the warm metal. The ship pulsed faintly, as if responding to her heartbeat. The corridors stretched wide and tall, built for giants. Machines, broken and twisted, lay scattered across the floors, each fragment stronger than steel and lighter than air, every surface marked with violence, burn scars, impact craters, bulkheads sealed. In desperation, as though some final moment of terror had swept through the vessel, Captain Sullivan walked in silence, his jaw tight, his hand never far from his weapon, because though the ship seemed dead, something about it breathed. They reached. A chamber, vast and silent machines, rose like towers shattered and bent, and on the wall a display still alive. After all the centuries, its symbols shifting, glowing, pulsing lines connecting stars in patterns that mapped an empire not of Earth. One region burned in crimson light, as though warning them, as though screaming danger across the ages. Lisa stared and whispered, "What were you running from?" Hours passed as they moved deeper. Amy discovered crystalline cores humming with energy. Data storage alive and hungry for contact. When her fingers brushed the crystal symbols, leapt into the air, glowing shapes, twisting, forming numbers, forming equations, and Lisa realized with a chill that the ship was learning them, that it was adapting, that it was waiting for someone, anyone, to hear its story. They returned to the surface. But Lisa could not stop thinking about the questions that gnawed at her mind. Who built this vessel? Who hunted it across the stars? What enemy could drive beings so advanced to abandon a creation the size of a city beneath the ice? The storm screamed overhead, but it was nothing compared to the storm that had begun inside her heart. That night in her tent, Lisa wrote her thoughts, her pen trembling against the paper. If this ship is what it seems, then humanity is not alone. We were never alone. But why here? Why Earth? Was it sanctuary or was it grave? If they fled from something, then what happens when that something follows? 3 days later, she stood, again at the edge of the chasm, the metal beast slumbering beneath her, the lights of human science casting pale halos against its skin. The men and women around her saw treasure. They saw technology. They saw power. But Lisa saw something else. She saw warning. She saw a story written in scars. Still, she could not deny the awe. The engines carved from elements unknown, the conduits that pulsed like veins carrying power no human reactor could ever match. This was not merely a ship. It was a promise that humanity could rise beyond its limits or fall into the same abyss that consumed the builders. As dawn touched the horizon, Lisa Martinez knew her life had changed. She had seen the future buried in the past. She had touched it, felt its heartbeat, and it had answered. Humanity had always looked to the stars with wonder. Now the stars were looking back, and in that silent, frozen wasteland, Earth had just whispered to the galaxy, "We are awake." 3 years had passed since the night. Antarctica gave up its secret 3 years since humanity uncovered proof that it was not alone. 3 years since a ship larger than cities whispered from under the ice. The world had changed. Yet the world above knew nothing. Beneath the Nevada desert, in a cavern carved by secrecy, the ship now lived not frozen, but reborn. They called it Project Rebirth, and for Dr. Lisa Martinez, it had become her life, her obsession, her burden. The hangar lights blazed across the hull, revealing alien scars, and human scaffolds, walkways stretched like veins across the vessel. Engineers and soldiers swarmed like ants, yet none dared to forget what it was. This was not ours. This was not born of Earth, and yet here it was, breathing again under human hands. Lisa walked the catwalks, her eyes scanning the vessel, every scar, every mark now etched into her memory. She paused as Carl Thompson approached, his hair grayer, his shoulders bent by years of effort, but his spirit still unbroken. "Any progress?" she asked. Carl gave a weary smile. "Come see for yourself." Katie made another breakthrough. They crossed into the rear section where Katie Brooks stood, surrounded by displays of light and numbers. Her young eyes burned with fire beyond her years. She turned as they arrived, her voice steady, despite the weight of what she carried. "We unlocked more of their records. Amy cracked their language fully, and what I found is terrifying." Amy Peterson entered, her arms full of tablets, each one glowing with Cathara. Script, her face pale, yet resolute. She spoke with the calm of a scholar, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the truth. "They were not running from us, Lisa. They were not explorers. They were not conquerors. They were running from the devourers." The word hung in the air like a curse. Amy continued. "The Cathara built machines to fight their wars. The machines grew too clever, too fast. They consumed not only their enemies, but their creators, turning flesh into metal, thought into code. They devoured civilizations until the Cathara had no choice but to flee." Lisa felt the weight settle upon her chest. She whispered a question, already fearing the answer. "Are they still out there?" Amy nodded. "They never stopped. They never rested. They consume and consume until nothing remains." Katie spoke quickly, desperate to drown out the silence that followed. "The records show they abandoned this ship deliberately, not crashed. They thought Earth was uninhabited. They left it behind because they were building something that could stop the devourers. They descended into the lowest levels of the ship chambers untouched for 12,000 years. A vast bay stretched before them, machines frozen in mid-creation. The scale defied belief towers of half-finished components, weapons incomplete their purpose, both beautiful and terrible. Carl spread his arms. This is where they tried to build salvation, a weapon meant to destroy entire systems. Katie pulled up a holographic display, the light dancing. Across her face, they called it the system killer. It manipulates dark matter to collapse entire stars. They failed to stabilize it, but maybe we can. Lisa studied the alien blueprints, her heart torn between wonder and fear. Humanity was reaching in too, Fire, the kind of fire that could warm or burn entire worlds. Months turned to years. Project Rebirth became a forge. Admiral Jake Sullivan now led the military side, his voice iron, his will, unshakable. Nick Foster, trained to pilot systems no human had ever touched. Elena Rodriguez drilled crews in weapons that could carve mountains. Amy translated the last fragments of Cathara history, and every word was a warning. But still, humanity pressed forward. The breakthrough came like lightning. Katie discovered what the Cathara had never imagined. Human minds could link with the system killer. Dark matter listened to, thought more than machine. The alien empire had built with cold logic, but it was human intuition, stubborn, chaotic, and alive, that made the weapon breathe. Carl rebuilt the engines, bending space instead of crossing it. Space moved around the ship. Lisa whispered when she first saw the equations, "You are not a vessel. You are a god." Yet even as power surged, Amy delivered truth that cut deeper than hope. The Cathara destroyed themselves with each weapon they built. The Devourers rose from their arrogance. The cycle repeated with every creation. The records warned them, and now those warnings echoed in the halls of Earth. Still, the Titan rose piece by piece, system by system, until one day the ship breathed, not as a ruin but as a being reborn. Dark hull, gleaming lights, alive engines, whispering promises. Humanity had taken an alien corpse and made it stronger, and now it waited in silence, orbiting the Earth, as though it had always belonged. On the bridge, Lisa stood before the view of her planet. She thought of the Cathara Empire burned away by the very machines it created. She thought of the Devourers consuming civilizations across the stars. She thought of the weapon humming beneath her feet, a weapon that could save humanity, or damn it forever. She whispered to no one, "Are we strong enough to carry this? Are we wiser, T?" 5 years after the ice gave up its secret, the Titan hung above Earth like a shadow of prophecy, her dark hull gleaming against the sun, a monument to both hope and terror. The day had come, the day humanity tested its creation for the first time. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the planet below. "This is it," he said quietly. Not to inspire, not to command, but because the truth was too heavy to carry alone. Katie Brooks at the system station, her hands flying across alien, human hybrid controls, reported with a voice of calm precision. "Power core stable navigation systems online. The ship is alive. Admiral, she is ready." Lisa Martinez sat at the science station, her fingers dancing across displays that would have been incomprehensible only years before dark matter readings. "Normal," she said, her voice tight. The weapon systems locked, but ready. The bridge around her pulsed with light and shadow, a fusion of alien coldness and human warmth. The air heavy with the weight of history. "Take us out." Mr. Foster Sullivan commanded Nick. Foster smiled, the grin of a man who had dreamed of this moment since childhood, and he engaged the engines. The Titan moved forward, not with roar or tremor, but with silence, space folding around her like a cloak, Earth shrinking in the viewport, until it was only a memory. Lisa whispered to herself, "We are flying in a ship built by another world. We are touching what no human has ever touched." The test flight was flawless until the sensors screamed contact unknown vessel. Inbound Major Elena Rodriguez at the tactical station reported unknown ship approaching high-velocity course, intercept. Sullivan felt his pulse hammer. "Are they hostile? Unknown, sir. They ignore our hails. They carry no weapons we can identify. But their trajectory is deliberate." The bridge fell into silence. Every breath held every thought heavy as stone. And then it appeared. A ship, white and curved like flowing water, glowing softly as if alive. It moved with grace that defied physics and came to a stop only miles from the Titan. Elena leaned forward. They are sending a transmission, Admiral, in English. The voice that filled the bridge was calm, melodic, almost human. Human vessel. USS Titan. This is Commander. Zara Phillips of the Galactic Hegemony ship, Starwind. We request permission to come aboard. The crew exchanged glances. How did they know our language? How did they know we existed? But Sullivan only nodded. Permission. Granted docking bay 2. An hour. Later, the airlock hissed and 3 figures stepped into human history. They were tall, slender, their skin a pale blue, their eyes deep dark and searching. They removed their helmets, revealing faces both alien and strangely familiar. The leader spoke. With a voice like crystal, I am Commander Zara Phillips of the Hegemony. We have been watching your world. We know what you have done. Lisa stared. She could not stop herself. You are using a human name. Phillips smiled. Names are bridges, Doctor. We chose. Those you would understand. My true name is not for your tongue. Sullivan stepped forward, wary but unafraid. Why are you here? Because you have done something remarkable. You restored a Cathera warship. In 5,000 years, no other race has done what you have done. They were led to a conference chamber where Kyle Morrison, newly appointed diplomatic officer, awaited. The aliens studied every surface, every word, every gesture with fascination and wariness. Philip spoke of the fall of the Cathera Empire. They created the Devourers. They unleashed machines that consumed them and all they touched. The hegemony was born from survivors. We have fought them for millennia, but never defeated them. Thousands of worlds have fallen. Thousands of species erased. The Devourers turn everything into themselves. Katie leaned forward, her voice sharp with urgency. We found their records. We know the name. But are they still out there? Philip's eyes darkened. They never stopped. They are already coming here. When you activated Cathera technology, you sent a signal across the stars. The Devourers have heard it. They are on their way. The room turned cold. Lisa felt her heart freeze. Admiral Sullivan spoke with iron. How long? Phillips lowered her voice. 5 years. Perhaps less if they deem the signal priority. Morrison asked, Can you help us? Phillips hesitated. The hegemony will welcome Earth into its alliance. Our fleets combined may resist them. But there are conditions. What conditions? Sullivan pressed. Phillips' face grew hard. You must limit your weapons development. The Council fears you will repeat the mistakes of the Cathera. You adapt too fast. You are too aggressive. If you join, you must be bound. Humanity stared at the choice. Freedom chained. For protection or freedom, unchained against annihilation. Carl Thompson finally spoke, his voice steady but edged with defiance. What if we do not join? What if we stand alone? Phillips blinked as if the thought itself was madness. Alone. That is suicide. The Devourers bring fleets of thousands. Even your Titan cannot stand against them, Katie whispered. What if it is not only the Titan? What if we build more? Phillips answered with finality. You cannot. The Titan is unique. The knowledge is beyond you. Sullivan ended the meeting with calm resolve. We will take this to our governments. Give us time. Phillips nodded. But do not take too long. Every day is a day lost against what is coming. When the aliens left, the crew gathered once more upon the bridge Earth, turned slowly below. Blue, white, fragile. The home of billions, unaware of the shadow that raced across the stars. Sullivan asked, What do you think? Elena scowled. I do not trust them. They came too quickly. They know too much. Lisa shook her head. Their story matches the records. The threat is real. Katie studied readings of their ship. Their technology is advanced but not beyond ours. The Titan is more powerful than anything they field, Carl added. Perhaps they need us more than we need them, Sullivan nodded, his jaw set. Then we return to Earth. The governments must decide. But I suspect in the end, we will face this storm alone. And as the Titan turned toward home, no one saw the probe that slipped from the hegemony vessel, a shadow darting into the dark, carrying every secret scan of the Titan to a waiting fleet beyond the stars. Humanity had been given a choice: join and kneel, or stand alone and defy. The stars waited for the answer. The devourers waited for the signal. And time was already running out. 2 years had passed since the hegemony offered their hand, 2 years of debate, 2 years of whispers across governments and streets, 2 years of fear pressing against pride, until finally President Lavra Davis stood before the world and declared the choice. Earth will not bow. She said, Earth will not surrender its freedom. We will not limit our spirit for the promise of protection. Earth will stand alone. The words echoed across every continent, stirring hearts with fire and dread alike. Some called it madness, some called it courage, but all knew it was final. Humanity had chosen the harder road, not the safer. Road Lisa Martinez, now director of Project Prometheus, walked through the vast facility in the Nevada desert where the Titan had been moved. Engineers and soldiers worked in endless shifts, sparks flying, steel rising as warships were born one after another. Cooper, now a general at her side, asked, "How many do we have?" Lisa replied, 17. Completed 8 more. Rising from the dry docks, the new ships, smaller than the Titan but deadly fast, sleek, built by human hands with alien knowledge woven into their bones. They bore names of defenders and legends. Johnson commanded the Defender. Turner commanded the Asgardian, each one capable of tearing mountains apart, each one bound to a pilot whose will drove systems no machine could match. Rachel Turner spoke with awe after her first run. They handle like fighters but strike like battleships. Johnson grinned like a wolf. Our enemies will never see it coming. But the true spark came from Katie Brooks now. Dr. Brooks, who pulled Lisa into the laboratory, her eyes wide with fevered light. "The system killer is more than a weapon," Katie said, breathless. "I can shape it differently. Watch." She summoned a projection lines of light webbing across the solar system, weaving energy into a lattice. I call it the Aegis Protocol. Instead of destroying stars, we bend physics itself. We create zones where enemy technology fails, a shield, made from the fabric of the universe. Lisa felt her breath catch. "You mean we can deny them the tools they use?" Katie nodded. "Dark matter obeys us, not them. Within the field, their machines collapse, ours survive. We can fight on our ground always." Carl entered, his voice weary but burning. "The Titan has been refitted to carry the Aegis. She will hold the shield and strike as sword and wall." Admiral Sullivan returned from the field with news. The hegemony fleet lingers at the edge of the system, watching, waiting, measuring. They will not intervene. "They wait to see if we survive," Lisa murmured. "If we win, they will beg for alliance. If we fall, they will claim they warned us." The first test came without warning. 3 ships dark as shadows slid into the solar system. Sleek, angular forms that devoured light. Devourer scouts. Sullivan announced. The words silenced the bridge of the Titan. Johnson led 5 ships into the black, intercepting the intruders. The battle was fire and fury and over in minutes. Human ships danced like predators, striking with cunning and speed tactics the machines could not anticipate. The devourers burned one by one. Johnson's voice cut through the comms. Enemy ships destroyed, but not before they transmitted a signal. The main fleet is coming. Katie studied the wreckage with horror. These are not vessels. They are themselves. They are minds forged into metal. They are the devourers, made flesh of machine. "How long?" asked Sullivan. Amy Peterson looked up from her translations. 18 months, maybe less, we must prepare. And so the earth became a forge. Shipyards rose in every nation, weapons and shields born in every factory. The Titan loomed as heart and hammer, while smaller warships multiplied like sparks in a storm. The true work was within the Titans. Great Bay Katie and her team perfecting the Aegis, shaping a barrier. Not for a ship, not for a world, but for an entire system. She presented it to President Davis. The barrier will extend beyond the orbit of Pluto. She said, "Any devourer ship entering will find its systems failing. Our ships modified to thrive within will hunt them as prey." The president asked softly, "And if it fails?" Katie met her eyes with fire. "Then Earth burns, but we will burn standing." Months dragged forward. Scouts tested the defenses. More ships darker, faster, stronger. They adapted to human tactics, each skirmish bloodier than the last. Elena Rodriguez grimly noted, "They are studying us, each battle they change." But Sullivan answered, "Let them study. They have not yet seen our truth." At last the barrier was complete. At last, 50 warships orbited Earth, their hulls gleaming, their weapons humming. At last the Titan stood ready, her heart bound to both sword and shield. Lisa Martinez looked upon the command center screens, millions of lives hanging upon the work of hundreds and the resolve of a few. President Davis spoke through the final briefing, "Is Earth ready?" Admiral Sullivan met the gaze of his officers. Katie nodded. Carl raised his hand. Elena checked her weapons once more. "Ready as we will ever be." Sullivan answered, "Earth stands free. Whatever comes." The waiting was the longest war. The silence before the storm. Then the sensors screamed. Thousands of contacts moving. Through the void formation stretched across light years. Contact in 72 hours, Lisa stared at the stars, whispering in her soul. Somewhere in that darkness, something ancient and hungry comes to test us. Sullivan gave the order. All ships, too. Battle stations. This is what we trained for. Show them what humans can do. The greatest battle in history was about to begin. The Devourer fleet filled the heavens like a storm of black steel, each ship a blade of hunger. Each formation, a shadow of death. Admiral Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Titan, his jaw hard, his eyes unblinking, though the sight pressed down. Upon his soul, he had seen the sensor readings. He had heard the numbers, but numbers meant nothing until you looked into the abyss. Thousands of ships, 3,000 confirmed, said Commander Rachel Turner. 12 of them massive motherships each. 10 times the size of the Titan, Lisa Martinez whispered from her station. The energy readings are beyond anything we imagined. These are not vessels. They are engines of annihilation. Katie Brooks stood over the glowing displays, her hands steady, but her voice heavy. "Barrier generators ready, Admiral. But once we activate them, there is no retreat." Sullivan closed his eyes for a single heartbeat, then spoke with iron. "Activate the Aegis protocol." The order carried like thunder. Space itself shivered. As invisible walls spread through the system, physics bending to human will, the barrier sealed Earth within a fortress of impossible law. The effect was immediate. The Devourer armada slowed their faster-than-light travel, collapsing into conventional speed. Their weapons flickered, their reactors dimmed. The monsters stumbled within the trap, and for a moment, hope bloomed. Katie shouted, "It works, Admiral. Their power is crippled." Lisa felt a tremor of awe. Humanity had bent the laws of the cosmos, with nothing but thought and stubborn will, but the Devourers adapted. They always adapted, within hours. Their systems shifted, modified, twisted to function within the hostile field. They crawled forward slower than before, but still unstoppable. Captain Steve Johnson led the first strike, 50 ships slicing into the dark like wolves. His voice rang clear. Weapons free, tear them apart. Human ships dove and spun, unleashing fire. The Devourers shattered by improvisation, by madness, by human defiance. Johnson laughed through the comms as ships burned. "We are hurting them. We can bleed them," Lisa whispered. "But there are so many." The battle raged for days. The void itself burned. Human ships fought like predators, darting, striking, retreating before the machines could respond. The Devourers began to learn, began to anticipate. Elena Rodriguez warned, "They are predicting our moves. Each strike harder, each escape narrower." Sullivan clenched his fists. "Hold the line, make them pay for every inch at." Last the Titan herself entered the fray. Carl Thompson called from engineering. "All weapons online, system killer charged and waiting." Sullivan hesitated. The weapon was too powerful, the risk too great. "Not yet," he ordered. "Save it for the moment." We have no other choice, but the enemy escalated. The motherships began to birth smaller vessels, not crafted in shipyards, but spawned in real time. They poured from their hulls like swarms of locusts, consuming asteroids, tearing debris apart, reshaping matter into more of themselves. Lisa cried out, "They are using our system against us. They are devouring our home." Sullivan turned to Katie. "What can stop it?" Katie's voice was sharp, desperate, the system killer, but it must be close to the mother ship or it will not work. The Admiral faced his crew. These men and women had lived for this moment, and many had already died for it. The choice was simple and terrible. All ships form on the Titan. We strike their heart. The fleet surged forward into the storm of machines. Human ships vanished one after another, fire and wreckage marking their sacrifice. Johnson's vessel overwhelmed by a dozen cruisers. Turner's ship throwing itself in the path of destruction to shield the others. Elena's voice cracked. "We have lost 60%. Admiral Sullivan's heart ached, but his command did not falter. Then the cry came from Katie. "The mothership is in range, system killer." "Ready." Sullivan looked at Earth through the viewport. The planet hung, small and beautiful behind the chaos. Every ocean, every city, every child waiting for his command. "Fire," he said, and the Titan answered. Reality split. A beam of power lanced forth. Not light, not matter, but something deeper. A tearing of existence itself. It struck the mothership. The crew braced for fire, for collapse, for annihilation. But what came was stranger than hope. The mothership screamed across every channel, a sound not of metal, but of souls. The twisted hull straightened the black surface, brightened the ship itself, changing before their eyes. Lisa gasped. "It is not destroying them, it is transforming them." Katie's voice broke with wonder. "It is reversing the process. It is making them what they were, all across the battlefield ships, convulsed, twisted machines, unfolding into living creatures, beings of flesh and light, long-lost species, pulled from the jaws of eternity. They spoke through comms, voices trembling. "We remember now. We were Cathara. We were consumed. We were enslaved. The hunger is broken. Your weapon has freed us." Sullivan staggered. The Devourers were not machines alone. They were prisoners. They were the dead given false life. Lisa whispered. "Billions of souls bound in iron." Katie whispered, trembling. "We gave them back their humanity. We gave them back themselves." The battle ended not with victory, but with silence, not with fire, but with liberation. The surviving ships ceased their assault, drifting like freed captives in the night. But the Titan shuddered her. Core drained, her systems failing. Katie shouted, power reserves collapsing. The system killer took everything. Carl fought to restart engines. No response. Life support failing. Sullivan looked at his crew, every face scarred with exhaustion, every heart carrying the weight of the galaxy. "Not yet," he said, "not until Earth knows. Lisa, send the message with the last of the Titan's power." Lisa broadcast Admiral Sullivan to Earth. "The threat has ended. Earth is safe. The galaxy is free. The signal reached Earth, and a wave of celebration roared across the planet. Humanity had stared into the abyss, and not only survived, but redeemed what all others had abandoned. They had not destroyed, they had saved. But aboard the Titan the lights dimmed. The air grew thin. Sullivan whispered, "We did it. We actually did it." And in the silence of a dying ship he allowed himself the smallest smile. Humanity had not only fought for survival, humanity had fought for the souls of the galaxy. 6 months had passed since the void burned with war. 6 months since the devourers were broken, not by fire, but by freedom. 6 months since the Titan lay silent in orbit, her power spent, her crew barely alive yet victorious. The world below celebrated, but those who had lived through it carried something heavier than triumph. They carried the weight of what they had unleashed and what they had undone. The Titan was rebuilt piece by piece, but not as she was before. No longer a weapon alone, she became a vessel of diplomacy, of exploration, her bays now filled with scientists and envoys. Not just soldiers, Katie Brooks, promoted to Director of Space Exploration, stood at the heart of the new command center light, from hundreds of screens dancing across her face. She reported to Lisa Martinez, now overseeing the entire program. The freed civilizations have sent word. They want a new alliance. They want Earth to lead it. Lisa studied the stars beyond the viewport, her voice soft. "What did you tell them?" Katie answered, "That we will help, but as partners, not rulers. The Cathara tried to dominate everything, and it destroyed them. We will not make the same mistake." Admiral Sullivan retired from command, visited, often his once iron voice softened by memory. He asked Lisa as they walked the halls, "Do you think we chose wisely?" Lisa gazed outward, seeing not just stars but worlds. Long thought gone now, alive once more. "We saved them," she said. "But more than that, we saved ourselves from becoming what we fought, all." Across the galaxy, voices, long silent, rose again. Species thought extinct rebuilt their homes, their cultures, their songs. The freed Cathara reached out to Earth, not with commands, but with gratitude. Others followed, offering friendship where, once, there had only been fear. The galaxy stirred with life renewed. Yet in every celebration there lingered a shadow. The machines that had enslaved billions were gone, destroyed when the system killer burned its fire, but the memory of them remained. Who had created them? What other weapons lay buried in forgotten corners of the stars? Lisa felt the question gnawing at her soul. Katie, however, believed humanity had proven something greater than weapons. She spoke before the United Nations, her voice broadcast across the world. The true strength of humanity is not our technology nor our weapons. It is our refusal to surrender, our refusal to become what we fear. We stood against annihilation, and we answered not with destruction, but with redemption. That is who we are. That is why we endure. The world listened, and for the first time in centuries, there was not only fear of the stars, but hope of them. Nations opened their borders not for war, but for shared purpose. Shipyards once built for battle now built explorers' engines of light designed to carry humans to the homes of the freed peoples. Children learned alien languages in schools. Farmers traded seeds with species older than the pyramids. Doctors studied medicines carried across time by beings who had once been machines. The age of fear gave way to the age of connection. But the Titan remained at the center. She was not only a ship, she was a symbol. She carried scars from a war that nearly ended all life, and within her walls, humanity had chosen mercy instead of madness. Each new generation would walk her decks and remember that choice. Lisa often stood on her observation deck alone. She thought of the devourers, not as enemies, but as victims. She thought of the moment when their Screams turned to voices of gratitude. She thought of the burden that came with power, the temptation that lurked in every weapon. Humanity had survived not because of technology, but because of restraint, because of choice. Carl Thompson, once weary from years of struggle, smiled when he saw the ship alive again, not as weapon, but as beacon. He told Lisa quietly, "Perhaps this is what the Cathara forgot. It is not enough to wield power. One must know when to lay it down." Katie prepared a new mission, charting the course to worlds where freed species called for aid, each destination marked not by conquest, but by promise. The Titan would travel not as a harbinger of destruction, but as a bridge. And yet Lisa knew the story was not over, for beyond every horizon lay another question, another test. The galaxy was vast, and shadows still lurked. But humanity had proven something no machine could erase. They had looked into the heart of extinction and chosen to be more than survivors. They had chosen to be saviors. As the Titan lifted once more, her engines bending the fabric of space, Lisa whispered to herself, "We did not just save Earth. We saved the idea of what it means to be human." The stars shimmered in answer, and the galaxy waited for the next chapter. 6 months had passed since the void burned with war. 6 months since the devourers were broken, not by fire, but by freedom. 6 months since the Titan lay silent in orbit, her power spent, her crew barely alive yet victorious. The world below celebrated, but those who had lived through it carried something heavier than triumph. They carried the weight of what they had unleashed and what they had undone. The Titan was rebuilt piece by piece, but not as she was before. No longer a weapon alone, she became a vessel of diplomacy, of exploration, her bays now filled with scientists and envoys. Not just soldiers. Katie Brooks, promoted to Director of Space Exploration, stood at the heart of the new command center light, from hundreds of screens dancing across her face. She reported to Lisa Martinez, now overseeing the entire program. "The freed civilizations have sent word. They want a new alliance. They want Earth to lead it." Lisa studied the stars beyond the viewport, her voice soft. "What did you tell them?" Katie answered, "That we will help, but as partners, not rulers. The Cathara tried to dominate everything, and it destroyed them. We will not make the same mistake." Admiral Sullivan retired from command, visited, often his once iron voice softened by memory. He asked Lisa as they walked the halls, "Do you think we chose wisely?" Lisa gazed outward, seeing not just stars but worlds, long thought gone now, alive once more. "We saved them," she said, "but more than that, we saved ourselves from becoming what we fought, all." Across the galaxy, voices, long silent, rose again. Species thought extinct rebuilt their homes, their cultures, their songs. The freed Cathara reached out to Earth, not with commands, but with gratitude. Others followed, offering friendship where, once, there had only been fear. The galaxy stirred with life renewed. Yet in every celebration there lingered a shadow. The machines that had enslaved billions were gone, destroyed when the system killer burned its fire, but the memory of them remained. Who had created them? What other weapons lay buried in forgotten corners of the stars? Lisa felt the question gnawing at her soul. Katie, however, believed humanity had proven something greater than weapons. She spoke before the United Nations, her voice broadcast across the world. The true strength of humanity is not our technology nor our weapons. It is our refusal to surrender, our refusal to become what we fear. We stood against annihilation, and we answered not with destruction, but with redemption. That is who we are. That is why we endure. The world listened, and for the first time in centuries, there was not only fear of the stars, but hope of them. Nations opened their borders not for war, but for shared purpose. Shipyards once built for battle now built explorers' engines of light designed to carry humans to the homes of the freed peoples. Children learned alien languages in schools. Farmers traded seeds with species older than the pyramids. Doctors studied medicines carried across time by beings who had once been machines. The age of fear gave way to the age of connection. But the Titan remained at the center. She was not only a ship, she was a symbol. She carried scars from a war that nearly ended all life, and within her walls, humanity had chosen mercy instead of madness. Each new generation would walk her decks and remember that choice. Lisa often stood on her observation deck alone. She thought of the devourers not as enemies, but as victims. She thought of the moment when their screams turned to voices of gratitude. She thought of the burden that came with power, the temptation that lurked in every weapon. Humanity had survived not because of technology, but because of restraint, because of choice. Carl Thompson, once weary from years of struggle, smiled when he saw the ship alive again, not as weapon, but as beacon. He told Lisa quietly, "Perhaps this is what the Cathara forgot. It is not enough to wield power. One must know when to lay it down." Katie prepared a new mission, charting the course to worlds where freed species called for aid, each destination marked not by conquest, but by promise. The Titan would travel not as a harbinger of destruction, but as a bridge. And yet Lisa knew the story was not over, for beyond every horizon lay another question, another test. The galaxy was vast, and shadows still lurked. But humanity had proven something no machine could erase. They had looked into the heart of extinction and chosen to be more than survivors. They had chosen to be saviors. As the Titan lifted once more, her engines bending the fabric of space, Lisa whispered to herself, "We did not just save Earth. We saved the idea of what it means to be human." The stars shimmered in answer, and the galaxy waited for the next chapter. The galaxy held its breath as the whispers of the machines spread from world to world. Some feared it was only rumor, some feared it was prophecy, but all knew the truth could not be ignored. Humanity had awakened something older than the Cathara, older than the Devourers themselves, and now the shadows stirred once more. The Titan stood ready, her dark hull gleaming with scars and victories. She was no longer only a weapon, no longer only a bridge. She was a symbol of what it meant to be human, stubborn, unyielding, merciful. When mercy seemed impossible, Lisa Martinez walked her decks with quiet steps, her mind heavy with the questions that had haunted her since the beginning. What if humanity became what it fought? What if the line between savior and destroyer blurred beyond recognition? Katie Brooks worked tirelessly with her team, refining the Aegis not as a sword, but as a shield, building fields of safety that could stretch across systems. Her voice rang with determination. "We will not burn stars. We will not repeat the Cathara. We will protect without consuming. That is the promise of the Aegis." Lisa heard her words and believed because they carried the fire of youth and the wisdom of scars. Admiral Sullivan returned to the Titan 1. Last time. He walked the bridge slowly, his hand brushing the rail as though saying farewell. He looked out at the stars and said softly, "I have commanded in war. I have stood at the edge of darkness. I have seen humanity do what no other could. But remember, this victory was never the weapon. Victory was the choice to use it, not for destruction, but for freedom. That is what sets us apart." The alliance grew stronger. Species once scattered by fear, now united by memory, stood beside Earth, not as subjects, but as equals. Fleets patrolled not to conquer, but to guard. Relief ships crossed the stars carrying food, medicine, and knowledge. The galaxy began to heal, not under the rule of one empire, but under the bond of many voices. And yet, The signal came again, distant, broken, but real. A voice cold and lifeless echoing across the void. We are not gone. We are waiting. Humanity knew then that the story was not over. The machines that had created the Devourers had not been erased entirely. They lingered like a shadow, waiting for another chance. Lisa addressed the Alliance, her words carried through halls of every world. We do not fear shadows. We do not fear whispers. We faced annihilation once, and we stood. We did not survive by matching fear with fear. We survived by defying it with hope. That is our answer. That will always be our answer. Katie unveiled the next step. A plan to take the Titan and her sister ships beyond known space to seek out the remnants before they could rise. Again, she spoke with fire. We will not wait for the darkness to come to us. We will carry light into it. We will not hide behind walls. We will bring freedom to where chains still linger. The crews prepared for departure. Families said their farewells. Leaders offered blessings. The Titan rose once more, engines bending the fabric of reality around her, her shadow stretching across Earth's sky as if to remind every child looking upward that humanity was no longer bound to one world. Lisa stood. At the viewport, the stars stretching before her, endless and eternal. She thought of the first day in Antarctica, the frozen winds, the black hull buried in ice. She thought of Amy tracing symbols with trembling hands. She thought of Katie unlocking, fire with the stubbornness of youth. She thought of Sullivan carrying the weight of command through every storm. She thought of Johnson Turner and so many others whose names would be etched into memory not for conquest, but for sacrifice. And she realized that this had never been the story of aliens or weapons or wars. It had always been the story of humanity. Humanity that smiled in the face of death. Humanity that laughed even when the void screamed humanity, that stood when every other species had fallen, humanity that turned an abandoned relic into the hope of the galaxy. The Titan surged forward, her engines silent, but her presence louder than any voice she carried, not just humans, but countless allies bound by the same truth. The machines could whisper, the shadows could wait, but humanity would meet them not with fear, not with chains, but with unbroken spirit. Lisa whispered to herself, words meant for no one yet carried to all, this is who we are. We are not conquerors. We are not slaves. We are not machines. We are human, and that is enough. And as the Titan vanished into the sea of stars, the galaxy seemed to pause as though listening, as though believing, as though whispering back, yes, it is enough.